evening and welcome to this special meeting of Troy City Council. It's Monday, October 31st. It's 5:30 p.m. My name is William Lutz, President of Council. For any of the folks in the overflow crowd in the hall, we do have 4 seats available up front, it looks like, if you wish to come in and take a seat.
2 seats right here.
And a couple other seats, so we'll do our best to make this as comfortable as possible for everybody. At this time, we'll ask Mrs. Knight to please call the roll.
Mr. Whidden.
Here.
Mr. Twist.
Here.
Mrs. Snee.
Here.
Mr. Sievert.
Present.
Mr. Schilling.
Present.
Mr. Rozelle.
Here.
Mr. Pierce.
Present.
Mr. Phillips.
Here.
Mrs. Marshall.
Here.
All members are present.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. Mrs. Knight, will you please read the announcement of the notice of special meeting of Troy City Council and then distribute the notice for all members to sign?
Notice of special meeting of the City Council to all members of Council, Mrs. Marshall and Mr. Rozelle. Mr. Phillips, Mr. Pierce, Mr. Schilling, Mr. Sievert, Mrs. Snee, Mr. Twist, Mr. Whidden, Mr. Lutz. You are hereby notified that there will be a special meeting of the City Council of the City of Troy, Ohio, at the Council Chambers in said city on Monday, the 31st day of October, 2022 at 5:30 p.m. for the purpose of adjourning into executive session for the purpose of a conference with an attorney for the public body concerning disputes involving the public body that are subject of pending or imminent court action, returning to regular session and considering the following legislation. R68 2022 authorized agreement for 2022 with legal counsel Jackson Lewis PC. R69 2022 authorized an agreement for 2022 with legal counsel Buckley King, and Resolution R70 2022 authorized the filing of a notice of appeal only if another party files a notice of appeal related to case number 21CV378 Tavern Building in Paren. The special meeting has been established to address the emergency legislation that is date sensitive. Meeting is called by Council President Lutz pursuant to Rule 25 of the Troy City Council Rules for Procedure.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. Notice is being distributed to members of council to sign. I'll entertain a motion.
We can't hear that.
Okay, we can do that. We're not used to such a large crowd.
Executive session.
Council, I will entertain a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn into executive session.
Second.
For the purpose of?
For the purpose of discussing legal or personnel or other items that fall under this privilege for City Council.
Read it right from there.
Oh, sorry. For the purpose of a conference with an attorney for the public body concerning disputes involving the public body that are the subject of pending or imminent court action.
Second.
We have a motion to adjourn into executive session by Mr. Phillips, seconded by Mr. Twist. Mrs. Knight, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Twist.
Yes.
Mrs. Snee.
Yes.
Mr. Sievert.
Yes.
Mr. Schilling.
Yes.
Mr. Rozelle.
Yes.
Mr. Pierce.
Yes.
Mr. Phillips.
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall.
Yes.
Mr. Whidden.
Yes.
The motion is approved.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. At this time, City Council will be adjourning to the mayor's office for an executive session to speak with legal counsel. You are more than welcome to stay here.
Opportunity for the public to speak before you deliberate?
At this time, there's not. I'm sorry.
We ask in advance.
Again, you are welcome to stay as long as you wish. I cannot tell you how long this will last. Okay, I want to thank everybody for sticking around. I sincerely apologize for the length of that took longer than we had hoped, but I'm grateful that you're all here. I also want to be very clear that our state laws prevent us from making any decisions in executive session. The only thing that took place were questions and comments from our legal counsel and amongst the council members themselves. I want to be clear, no decisions were made. At that point, I'll entertain a motion.
I make a motion to return to regular session.
Second.
It has been moved to return to regular session by Mr. Phillips, seconded by Mr. Rozell. Mrs. Knight, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Snee?
Here.
Yes.
Yes. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Mr.
Yes.
Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
We are in regular session.
Mr. Phillips for a
If I
motion.
might make a motion to handle our committee reports in the like fashion as we do in our regular council meetings and the public comment with a 2-minute time limit, please.
Second.
It has been moved moved by Mr. Phillips, seconded by Mr. Sievert. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Motion is approved.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. We'll move on to committee reports. I believe we have 3 reports tonight from the Law and Ordinance Committee. And Mrs. Snee.
I think we have one report with 3,
One
that
report
includes
with
3
3
items.
items.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. President. This committee met on October 24th to review a request that professional service agreements be authorized with 2 legal firms for 2022, and to authorize the filing of a notice of appeal in response only in the event another party files a notice of appeal related to a recent decision on the Tavern Building. This committee recommends that legislation be prepared authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety to 1, enter into an agreement with the law firm of Jackson Lewis, P.C. for employment-related services for 2022. 2, enter into an agreement with the law firm of Buckley King for legal services for 2022. 3, file a notice of appeal only in the event another party files a notice of appeal regarding the trial court's decision regarding the certificate of appropriateness for the Tavern Building, so that the city is in a position to make payment to the legal firms and time requirements related to appeals. The committee supports emergency legislation for the 3 items. And this is respectfully submitted by Mr. Phillips, Mr. Sievert, and myself as chair.
Thank you, Mrs. Snee. Are there any comments or questions on the report? We will now open it up for citizen comments for items on the agenda or the committee report. If you wish to address council, you are more than welcome to come to the lectern, give your name and address. You have 2 minutes to address council. Mr. Kerber will be our timekeeper this evening.
First of all, I'd like to thank everybody who stuck that out and despite the significant inconvenience are here tonight. I really appreciate you being here to stand up for Troy's best interests. Some perspective this evening. 15 years ago, it cost Ben Southerly, Troy Historic Preservation Alliance, 110.5 West Main Street. Some perspective for you this evening. 15 years ago, it cost $23 million to restore the Fort Piqua Hotel right here in Miami County. $23 million. For nearly 3 years now, our community has seen its reputation tarnished over a project that would cost less than $1 million to bring up to minimum building code. And on top of that, the property owner has hundreds of thousands of dollars to help cover those costs as a result of insurance proceeds from the tornado. How have we let Troy and its beautiful downtown get tripped up by a relatively small project like this? Disappointing doesn't begin to cover it, council members. The fact that this has not been resolved is an embarrassment to our community. The sidewalk continues to be closed, creating a public safety risk. Precious parking spaces have gone unused for years. One of the most historic buildings in Troy and in Miami County is being lost to demolition by neglect. Judge Wall said in her decision, there is no doubt that the Tavern Building has a remarkable history. The building is on Preservation Ohio's list of the state's most endangered historic sites, and it would contribute to an expansion of the Public Square Historic District listed on the National Register of Historic Places. It is associated with the largest emancipation of enslaved people prior to the Civil War in the entire nation. In 1846, nearly 400 black people had to register at this courthouse as part of Ohio's black laws. Important Ohio history that you are all being asked to authorize fighting to tear down. And the building added to it in 1902 is historic in its own right and is the centerpiece of an intact block of historic storefronts. I'll now turn it over to Lorraine Wyatt.
Hello, good evening. My name is Lorraine Wyatt. I live at 118 South Walnut, downtown. I am a member of THPA, and I also fought for the church, and of course now we're here again trying to fight for one of the most significant buildings in the city. Every day that that building sits unrepaired represents a collective failure of leadership. A collective failure of imagination. Instead of the property owner being held accountable, you are asked to authorize a blank check to defend them with our tax dollars. You will say that you are doing this to support the Board of Zoning Appeals, but let's call it what it is. Our city leaders are betraying the public trust, and through their lot in with the property owner who should have been subjected to code enforcement. I hope every single council member that votes tonight remembers that when you cast your vote, and if you cast your vote to continue this appeal, you are not standing on the right side of history, and you all know that. And you are not serving Troy's best interests. The THPA, Troy Historic Preservation Alliance, is a nonprofit organization. We advocate for preservation, restoration, and repurposing of our city's historic places. We are speaking on the behalf of our community. The community loves this building. I live in the community. I love this building. Having a downtown that many other Ohio cities can only dream of having, how can we squander like this? Why aren't we working together to solve this? Our community is better than this. It's time to move past excuses and put our collective energy into solutions. We have done that from the beginning. This building would be fixed now to the benefit of all involved. Thank you. Martin.
Good evening. I'm Martin Stewart, 1486 Cheshire Road, Troy. I'm a member of the Troy Historical Society. I'm a member of the Troy Historical Preservation Alliance. I'm also author of the 71st Ohio and the Volunteer Infantry in the Civil War, which puts me in a unique position to talk about the historical aspect of the old courthouse, given that my Colonel Barton Kyle worked there for many, many years. We also need to take a moment to address an email exchange last week when the executive director of Heritage Ohio reached out to you to offer to help with this situation. You all were part of that email thread. Mr. Titterington made some comments that need to be addressed. First, Mr. Titterington wrote, "Rest assured that staff has, in spite of what's been reported, been diligently looking at every option to redevelop the target property to no avail. Has the city staff thoroughly explored the state historic preservation tax credit incentive and the federal historic tax credit program for this building? If so, what did you find? Keep in mind that the state earlier this year increased the tax credit from 25% to 35% for communities of Troy's size. There's a significant amount of dollars at play, and this is a perfect time to pursue this project rather than keep this building tied up in court for a long, long time." Julia?
Hi. Julie Carter, 17 East Water Street, member of the Troy Historic Preservation Alliance. I'd also like to address the message that was sent to the Executive Director of Heritage Ohio. In this message, Mr. Titterington also stated, "The city has rigorously enforced our property maintenance codes where legally possible, only staying enforcement with the advent of the current court proceedings. This is not the case. The city has had an opportunity to decline to issue a certificate of appropriateness to demolish this property and then proceed with code enforcement. It was not obligated to issue a certificate of appropriateness, nor should it have done so. One could use many adjectives to describe the city's handling of code enforcement around this building. Rigorous is not one of them. Mr. Tennerington said, "We have investigated every possible tax credit, economic development incentive, grant, foundation, and other funding source. We sincerely doubt that this is the case. THPA offered to help raise funds in April 2021. We were told it would be way too late to put the brakes on less than desirable solutions for that building. It's embarrassing that the executive director of Troy Main Street's parent organization received this unhelpful response from our city."
Chris Manning, 6 Lafayette Street, Casstown. I'm also on the THPA board, Executive Director of the Overfield Tavern Museum, Troy's oldest building, and on the Troy Historical Society. Mayor Oda, now is the time for you to be a leader on this issue. We are asking you to invite a group of stakeholders to the table. This is your opportunity to be a unifying force for our community. Let's each bring the pieces of the puzzle that we can contribute and figure out where the gaps are, and then let's work together to address them. Tonight, we want to offer one piece of the puzzle. THP member Scott McMiller is a mason by trade. Scott's in the audience, and has worked on many historic buildings in downtown Troy. He has made an incredibly generous offer to repair the parapet on this building at no charge to the property owner so that the sidewalk can be reopened. THPA is willing to explore other ways to contribute to this project as well. But in return for this very generous offer, we need the property owner to commit to restoration of the property instead of demolition. To demolish this large and much-loved building would be like detonating a bomb in a town that has far better options within reach.
Hello, my name is Sonia Holycross. I live at 44 South Cedar Street, Troy, Ohio. I am a THPA member, and I'm also a Troy Human Relations Committee member. Members of council, we need you to show leadership on this issue too. We are counting on you. When you go into executive session, well, you already have, ask the hard questions. Continue to ask them before you vote. We need you to apply critical thinking to what you are being told. We were told that by one council member that cities almost always win these things or types of appeals, but this city did not win. So we need you to keep an open mind to the input that you are hearing tonight. The community has skill sets to offer to help end this impasse, but you have to demonstrate the leadership to explore them. Remember, you are here to represent the interests of our citizens of Troy, Ohio. Stand up for people who elected you. The people of Troy want this resolved. Do not do a disservice to your historic downtown or your citizens with your vote tonight. Do not divide our community any further than you already have by voting to continue the appeal and put more money down the drain. Let's work together to find solutions instead. Other communities lack the advantages that Troy has, but nonetheless have figured this out. We can too. Please support Troy citizens before you even entertain continuing to support citizens that don't even live in your town. Thank you.
Is there anyone else that wishes to address council? Seeing none, we'll go on to resolutions. We'll ask Mrs. Knight to read the first resolution of the evening, Resolution R68, 2022.
Resolution number R68, 2022, resolution authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety of the City of Troy, Ohio, to employ counsel for the purpose of employment-related services and declaring an emergency. This is for the services of Jackson Lewis PC for employment-related services during 2022, first reading.
How's council wish to act?
Move to suspend.
Second.
It's been moved to suspend the three reading rule by Mr. Schilling, seconded by Mr. Phillips. Mrs. Knight, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Schilling,
Yes.
Mr. Rozell,
Yes.
Mr. Pierce,
Yes.
Mr. Phillips,
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall,
Yes.
Mr. Whidden,
No.
Mr. Twist,
Yes.
Mrs. Snee,
Yes.
Mr. Sievert.
Yes.
The three reading rule has been suspended.
Motion to adopt the ordinance.
Second.
It's been moved to adopt the resolution by Mr. Phillips, seconded by Mr. Schilling. Are there any final comments or questions? Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Rozell,
Yes.
Mr. Pierce,
Yes.
Mr. Phillips,
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall,
Yes.
Mr. Whidden,
No.
Mr. Twist,
Yes.
Mrs. Snee,
Yes.
Mr. Sievert,
Yes.
Mr. Schilling.
Yes.
Resolution is adopted.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. Moving on to Resolution R69, 2022. Mrs. Knight, will you please read the resolution?
Resolution number R69, 2022. Resolution authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety of the City of Troy, Ohio, to employ legal counsel of Buckley King and declaring an emergency. This would be for services during 2022. First reading.
Does council wish to act?
Move for suspension.
Second.
It's been moved to suspend the three reading rule by Mr. Phillips, seconded by Mr. Sievert. Mrs. Knight, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Pierce,
Yes.
Mr. Phillips,
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall,
No.
Mr. Whidden,
No.
Mr. Twist,
Yes.
Mrs. Snee,
Yes.
Mr. Sievert,
Yes.
Mr. Schilling,
Yes.
Mr. Rozell.
No.
The three reading rule does not pass. This will be held over for a second reading. Mrs. Knight, I'll ask you to read Resolution R70, 2022.
Resolution number R70, 2022. Resolution authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety of the City of Troy, Ohio, to file a notice of appeal to the decision and judgment entry of the Common Pleas Court of Miami County, Ohio, in reference to case number 21CV378 and declaring an emergency. This is the first reading.
How's council wish to act?
Move for suspension.
It's been moved to suspend the three reading rule by Mr. Phillips, seconded by Mr. Pierce. Mrs. Knight, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Phillips,
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall,
No.
Mr. Whidden,
No.
Mr. Twist,
No.
Mrs. Snee,
Yes.
Mr. Sievert,
Yes.
Mr. Schilling,
Yes.
Mr. Rozell,
No.
Mr. Pierce.
Yes.
Fails.
This item also fails. This will be held over for a second reading. I have a statement that I wish to make. As President of Council, I am bound by Rule 1 of the Rules of Procedure of Council. In part, Rule 1 states, "The presiding officer shall avoid any appearance of partisanship on any question. The President is solely to see that the business properly brought before Council is conducted in an orderly manner, and that the members of Council observe the rules of procedure adopted by this Council. My role as President is not to speak in support or in opposition of resolutions or ordinances brought forward for discussion and to participate in the debate around such issues. However, there are important observations that I wish to share at this time. It has been 1,024 days since a tornado struck buildings in our downtown core, and tonight marks the first time that the mayor and our service safety director has specifically asked this council to take any action on the building at 112-118 West Main Street. The votes cast tonight on resolutions R69, 2022, and R70, 2022, are the first votes that this council has cast when it comes to this issue. That is not to say this council has been quiet when it comes to the consequences of the tornado. Under his initiative, Councilmember Schilling helped lead an effort to adopt a moratorium on all downtown demolitions, which led to a comprehensive review and subsequent amendments to our zoning code dealing specifically with demolitions of historically significant structures in our downtown core. A vacant property ordinance was brought up for discussion in front of our council's Community and Economic Development Committee. If it is within the prerogative of a council president to be proud of a council, I am certainly proud of this council. While absolutely no one can be happy with our city's continual inability to open up a heavily used public sidewalk and 7 badly needed parking spaces, it should be known that the responsibility for this inaction does not lie with your city council. And I'm frustrated to hear those comments. As previously stated, our city council has been proactive in dealing with the consequences of these issues, and every time this council's been asked to act, they have done so in a commendable manner. It cannot be overstated. Before tonight, this council has not been asked as a body to provide their advice or their guidance on the building at 112, 118 West Main Street. But tonight, at a specially called meeting of council, the mayor and the service safety director are asking this council to adopt 2 resolutions. The first resolution would in effect be a blank check to legal counsel related to the decision and judgment entry affirming in part and reversing in part the decision of the Troy Board of Zoning Appeals, case number 21 CV 378, and any future appeal. The second resolution would authorize the Director of Public Service and Safety to file or to have filed a notice of appeal regarding Common Pleas Court case number 21 CV 378 in support of the City of Troy Board of Zoning Appeals. An appeal that, as time goes on, appears to be more in the financial interest of a few select individuals rather than the interest of the general public. My question to the second resolution is has the Troy Board of Zoning Appeals as a body indicated their support for this decision to appeal? If so, when and where was this decision be made? Would it not be prudent to get the advice and guidance of the Board of Zoning Appeals on any future appeals, since that's the body in which this litigation is pertaining to? If this mayor and service safety director have treated the Board of Zoning Appeals anything like they've treated city council, we know the answer to that question. Of course the Board of Zoning Appeals has not been asked for their advice or guidance. Why would those that have the responsibility of running this community start looking for guidance and advice now? Those individuals that have the responsibility of running this community on a day-to-day basis have again failed to clearly communicate any strategy to our elected council members of this community, and they have unnecessarily placed this city council in the most precarious position. Coming to the end of our agenda, this meeting is adjourned.